Good morning, everyone. This is the Seasonal Employee Committee meeting. And present, we have the committee members, Town Manager David Hewitt, excuse me, Police Chief Dixon, Commissioner Kwiatkowski, and myself, Mike Sullivan. We also have Tim Evans here to give his input on questions, since it may affect the way we patrol the beach, and Tim currently is the supervisor for our beach ranger program. So at the last meeting, we discussed a number of items, and we had a number of items which we were going to have some research done on and that we would discuss today. And the first one of those, I think, is the fringe benefit questions about whether the temporary, if we hire temporary seasonal employees, if they would be entitled to fringe benefits, and whether that would have to be computed into the total cost of the program. So, does somebody have that answer?
Yes, sir. We've got Margaret Lancaster, who is the payroll clerk here, and she's provided a handout and can introduce the specifics on the particulars about temporary employment and fringe benefits. Is that the one?
Yes.
You've got that handout. That's
Basically, if the employee works 1,000 hours or more, they would be qualified for the retirement. With it being temporary or part-time, there is a clause that says that if it's not 12 consecutive months, that they would not get it, or it's based on our policy, if we have anything in our policy. But they also advised us to get legal advice as well. The 401k representative pretty much said the same thing, that the part-time person, if they're, would be called to duty at any time, but normally they see it through the whole year, not just half the year, that they would get the mandatory 5%. Again, depending on if our policy says anything different. And he also suggested to get the legal attorney's fee advice on that situation as well.
I'm a little confused. When it comes to 401k, would they have to work the minimum of 1,000 hours as well, or at any point?
No, that's only in the state retirement.
Okay.
And for law enforcement officers, to further a bit more in specifics, law enforcement officers have a mandatory 5% contribution, and then there's also the additional optional 5% contribution that's a match by the employee. So that amount could be as much as a 10% contribution on whatever the wages were, as opposed to, say, the town clerk is not a mandatory 5%, it's an optional 5%. If the clerk chooses to contribute 1% of her salary, the town matches 1%. So,
And you said that was unless we had a specific policy? Or for that, that is mandatory? That was not part of the specific policy?
right.
And what about the level of insurance that has to be covered by part-time? I mean, obviously, a police officer has to have insurance during this time, so that's a...
Well, ours, you also have a packet in front of you that talks about limited service employees, which is what our benefit book calls this type of employee. And it basically says that they're only eligible for legally mandated benefits, such as workers' comp and FICA. Then if you go look at the health insurance part of it, it actually talks that the town will comply with the Affordable Health Care Act, and talks about us doing insurance, we actually don't have to apply with that because of the amount of employees we have, that's incorrect. But I did check with a few human resources professionals and basically, and Blue Choice or Blue Shield, they said that we would have to cover them like we do any other full-time employee because they would be full-time. So basically 60 days, and then the first of the next month, they would be eligible for employee or benefits just like anybody else.
Now, there is another insurance piece there too, since these are law enforcement officers, badge, gun carriers, there's a liability, issue that we haven't checked on in terms of what that cost would be. It just dawned on me today that would be,
What I was
that
asking
would,
you.
that would be, an additional, we'd have to ask the league what that would do. More people, more coverage, what does that mean? It may be that it's blanket coverage in levels, I don't know.
Okay. I guess on what I
We
call.
just looked at the health insurance as a fringe benefit aspect of it, not the overarching insurance.
I guess I'm confused on the healthcare because I thought, as I understood, that if it was less than a certain number of hours a week, you were not covered. And if we have part-time at, say, 20 hours a week for 4 months of the year, that doesn't meet neither the hours nor the duration for mandatory coverage.
Well, two things. I thought you guys were looking at seasonal officers as in hiring officers, not part-time for so that was your answer for that. But we do pay a prorated portion of part-time if the employee chooses to participate. They don't have to, so that option would be there. That's in our book also. We pay prorated if they choose to participate. But no, that answer was on if they were full-time for those, say, 5-6 months for the season, however long you did it. You would have to treat them as a normal employee. Unless Blue Cross said if you wanted, you could consult with your attorney also, was also their thing, but they said to treat them like a normal employee.
I think where we're getting confused here, probably, that it's difficult, is we haven't actually sorted. Are we talking about having what I call part-time police officers, which means they do not work 40 hours a week, but they do work for that however many months we call the busy season? Or is the intent that we have 40-hour-a-week seasonal police? There's a different definition here, and it's occurring to me, we have not defined that, and that makes a big difference.
If I could jump in on this part and maybe kind of help with that. In our discussion last month, we talked about researching the types of complaints, and I assume I know we were going to get there, but this may help us get us in that direction to try to figure out. So as I was doing this and looking at it from the operator standpoint of what our officers are doing, the complaints that we're seeing, and where we need the focus and the help. I've gotten some graphs and charts here that I've given you. And it's kind of broken down into 3 categories here. That first line is May 1st through September 30th of 19, so it was last summer. Then you've got October to April, which is going to be, of course, the winter time. And then May through September of this year, which is this summer. And the blue line categories there, those are kind of the day shift concentrated. Doesn't mean we don't get them at nighttime, it's much heavier during the daytime. The green ones are your evenly distributed day and nights are answering about the same. And then the gold or orangish color there is your night shift concentrated. And basically what I found going through this is as our population increases with the summer, our domestics and disturbances increase, our EMS calls increase, our missing persons, which is usually a child lost on the beach, our motor vehicle collisions, our ordinance violations, and our water rescues. And what seems to pretty much stay consistent year-round are our alarms, assisting the fire department or sheriff's department on some of their calls, incident reports, Public assist, which that can be anything from, hey, I'm lost, I need directions, I'm locked out of my vehicle, I'm locked out of my house, just your random, public assist, anything we can do to assist the public. Our suspicious activity, traffic stops, and then wildlife complaints. And in doing this, we talked about the ordinance violations, what we're seeing. The vast majority, and I mean overwhelming majority of our ordinance are parking tickets. It's 95 or more of what we do. And then, of course, you see the citation section there. Speeding is probably the vast majority of that. Same thing with the wintertime. It's mostly parking. Get a few, we got one open burning. But then back to citations is speeding. So speeding and parking's, whether it's summer, winter, year-round, speeding and parking are our two biggest concerns. And to be real honest, in everything I found, we very seldom have a need to spend, I say this reservedly, but I'm not saying we don't need to be on the beach, but the vast majority of issues that we have are with speeding and with parking. Even though dogs come up and other things like that, it doesn't elevate to the concern of what we have going on here with this. And another thing that I want to point out is, how do I put it? I don't know. So everyone knows, I'm jumping topics here. Everyone knows if you call the police department right now, it is hard to get up with an officer. Honestly, I mean, I hate to say it's almost impossible. We don't have anybody to man the phones or take care of that. I think that before, just in what I'm seeing and operating the department, before we concentrate on how to get people supplementing officers part-time, doing this, that, and the other, we've still got in-house issues that we need to fix first. We need a full-time representative to answer our phones and help us with office work. It does administrative duties. It doesn't even have to be a full-time sworn officer, but a clerk position or something like that to help us answer the phone, field calls, can help. In my opinion, is going to help much more. And I know this is way off topic from this, but this is just what I've seen in doing this. Would help much more than kind of where we're headed with this. I'm not saying we don't need to head down this road, but I think we've got issues here that we need to handle first. So, and I probably just convoluted the whole thing by saying that, but.
Maybe. But at one point, you did have a person working as a clerk in the police department.
We have a part-time person. She does 39 hours is all she's allowed to operate, 39 hours across 2 weeks. So she's doing less than 20, she's doing about actually I think it's 38, it's 19 hours a week. When we've cycled through, we've unfortunately, over the last about 2 years, seemed to have consistently had people on light duty, which has been very terrible for road patrol, but it's been great for having people, because when we put them on light duty, they get desk duty there. Luckily, we're getting everybody back healthy, everybody's coming back to work, we don't have anybody on light duty. That's the biggest issue I'm seeing. I'm getting complaints all the time. We call the police department for a week straight and never get a hold of anybody. You just have to, during a 40-hour week, hope you catch one of the 19 hours that the young lady's there to answer the phone. So I know that convolutes this entire thing, but to me, for an operations standpoint, for what we need from the department, that is going to help serve this community 10 times better than trying to figure out how to hire 4 or 6 part-time officers and rotate them through and what they can supplement and what they can't supplement. And I think if you want to serve the community and for me to follow my core values and mission to serve the community, that is going to do it better. Hopefully I haven't messed this up too bad by saying that, but that's where I'm at with it.
No, it just, to me, it raises a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
Which are
Yeah.
intertwined with this. And I guess the first one would be, during the time period that we have someone, how many calls do they actually get?
I don't have an actual number, but I know it's a lot. The phone, I would invite anybody to sit in that office. That phone rings constantly.
And the other thing, I look here at the alarm activation. That's a daytime. So is that mostly people accidentally tripping their own alarm?
Yes, 95% of our alarm activations are accidental. It's either a renter coming in, or Kirby's Pest Control, or, you know, John's cleaning service. They'll go to the house and.
Tim
you know,
Evans.
Tim, yeah, and they don't realize the alarm's set, so, yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate, but 90% of them, they're, you know, we get there, they're an accidental alarm. But it doesn't negate the fact that we need to respond to it either, so.
No. But are many of those repeat activations, so that you go to
Most of them are
Mr.
not.
Smith's house?
There are a few, there's actually, we haven't been there in a while. You get used to the same houses. There was one in the 1300 block where it seemed like about once every 2 weeks it would go off. We have not been to that one in quite some time. Most of them are once, and whoever, whether it's the renter, the cleaner, you know, whoever, they've set it off accidentally, it doesn't happen again.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing that we need somebody manning the phones
Yeah.
more, because yes, I've been the brunt of a number of complaints, people saying what's going on, and I've talked to the chief about it a couple times about how this is. However, calling in a problem is not liable to get a rapid response. It goes, so unless it is a life and death emergency, or, as you say, a missing person or something, it's one of those that it's as soon as we can get an officer there, in which case, a lot of the things that are irritating our citizens won't ever get found out, because by the time a police officer gets there, that golf cart that is driving down the sidewalk and causing people great stress is off, they're gone. Or the parking violation at the end of the island at a walkway in the 1100 block, they're probably gone by then. So it's a combination to me still of, yes, I agree with you, we need somebody at the phones. But I still think we need a way to address these issues that our citizens are complaining about, and a lot of them are parking related, moving violation related. Sometimes I don't know how much of that is real versus it's their perception somebody's speeding, because people tend not to think what 35 miles an hour looks like when you're a human being sitting there. And golf carts, for the last 3 years, we've all heard the increase in complaints from people of golf carts. And we'll never get rid of dogs on the beach, but dogs on the beach. So what do you do so that people feel confident that the infractions are going in the right direction in terms of at least parking and golf cart, I'll just say safety?
Right. Well, and I think the board took a major step this year in allowing, we've gotten our agency back to 10 positions, which is a huge step. Now, even though we're still in the process of filling those positions, once we do that, we'll actually have 2 officers on patrol, full-time sworn. They'll be on patrol daytime and nighttime. So we're doubling our force from what we are right now, because right now we run 1 officer per shift. So in doing that, we're already doubling our force. I think if we also have that person that can answer the phone as soon as someone calls with a golf cart complaint or a dog complaint or whatever, and says, you know, hey, I have this issue, whatever it be, in the 1100 block, we'll have 2 officers available to respond. You know, I think we're already headed in that direction. I think at this point, and again, just for what I see, instead of trying to figure out how to supplement these responses more, we need to figure out how to field them better, how to take them in. Because nobody wants to call 911, and that is the best way to get up with us still, but nobody, and I understand that nobody wants to call 911 to say, hey, somebody's illegally parking down here.
Well, I mean, there has been also, I won't say confusion, but a hesitancy to rely on 911 as much, because there was a directive coming from the county, I think when COVID was starting, all this, to please save 911 for the real emergencies.
Yes.
And so, yeah, people aren't gonna say somebody illegally parking is a 911-ish,
That's right.
but it needs prompt response.
That's correct.
And so that would be my question is, how is that going to improve?
I think, in my opinion, I think it'll improve tremendously. I think the service that we can provide to the town just by being able to field these calls, and then we can take the appropriate response to get there. But once we fill the positions and get up to a full staff of 10, we're coming back to a healthy staff. We've got everybody back on patrol. Once we're able to do that, and we've got a person who can actually man the phones, and there, I mean, there's a list of other things that they can do in the office to help us, but the phone calls especially to help field these calls and say, hey, this is where the problem's at, then we can respond down there and handle that situation immediately, you know, barring being on, you know, priority traffic that would, you know, take priority, but.
Chief, can I
Please,
go
yeah.
a little bit further down the rabbit hole?
Please.
With, you know, it's obvious if you're giving this some consideration about someone in the front. I'm assuming when you said that they could do other things, are you talking about like a records technician and, you know, what type of access would you see them having to, like, CGIS, and is that, and my frame of reference is, when I was a manager in Leland, there was they called her the secretary, but she did more than field calls, see people at the window, and provide back shop paperwork support. Is that kind of what you're thinking about?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that position would be able to do all of those things like you were talking about. They would actually, as far as the CGIS stuff goes, it would be my goal to send them to get DCI certified, go through the CGIS training. You take the 911 dispatchers, they're not sworn law enforcement. They go through the CGIS security training, and they're able to run tags, you know, license plates, driver's license, things like that. So we could actually do a lot of that stuff in-house, you know, while they were working, instead of having to go through the 911 center. If you're on a traffic stop or you're out on the beach and you need to know who somebody is, you can actually do it through the office to say, hey, you know, this is what I've got, this is a driver's license number, and they can run it right there and give it back to you instead of having to go through the 911 center. So there's a magnitude of things that they can do in-house that would, you know, it would help us and supplement everything we do out here on patrol.
It is still only 40 hours a week.
Yes,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm talking about, it's not 7 days a week, it's not even 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you are still, to me, we still have this uncovered period of time.
And I agree.
So
Yeah.
I'm thinking season when weekends are some of the worst times, and it's not really an 8 to 4, 9 to 5 even during the week. It's a scatter of when you have issues. So I'm coming back with a clerk. I don't disagree that it's important for people to be able to get a voice and know that something is being managed right away, that a call is being made to an officer, et cetera. But we are still only talking about during season, part of the week and part of the day, and maybe not even necessarily the most important days of the week for a number of violations that are not people not knowing things and doing things.
That's right.
So I'm still questioning how we fix things
But,
And I do understand what you're saying, you're gonna have two people on patrol now instead of just one. Is that, in your mind, does that make up enough extra eyes on the strand to take care of the things that, again, have been of concern to our citizens for the past couple of years? And a lot of it is parking and moving violations and golf carts.
To me, I think it does, and I think if nothing else, I think we should give it a try first. We're going to, by next summer, we'll have everybody hired and trained and ready to go. And instead of just jumping straight into adding some additional summer help, I would like to, or I think we should try what we've got first and make sure this works before how do I say it? I don't want to add too much on at one time, I think, to be honest. You know, trying to manage these 10 and get them focused and 2 per shift. And then you add 4, 5, 6 more, trying to rotate through those schedules. I don't think it fixes anything, to be honest, just my opinion.
can I get a clarification? The administrative, non-sworn civilian that you're talking about in the front office
Yeah.
over here, you're talking about a full-time, 40-hour-a-week, 2,080-hour-a-year annual position. You're talking a new position, not a part-time seasonal thing.
Yeah, and
You're talking, just like I have a receptionist over here, you know, at the front window. It's a full-time, 40-hour-a-week, all-year-long position.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, I got way off topic from where.
No,
this
I
was,
just
but
want
yeah,
to clear,
that's-
because Pat kind of tripped me up when she said it's still part-time, but what you're talking about is a new position. A total,
Yes.
it's a full-up position.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
No, when I said it's still part-time, what I'm saying is you, having a 40-hour-a-week full-time person is still not, it's not a 24/7 call center call.
Right.
Coverage.
Right.
That's what I
Okay.
mean.
Gotcha.
I didn't mean it was
Okay.
part-time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you
Yeah,
understood
I
me.
did. I'm with
I
you.
got
It's-
you.
You're still only covering, out of an 8-hour day, you're only covering a third
third.
of it because you've still got 16 hours that are not being covered.
Right.
So, yeah. I get that. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like after looking at this and knowing, you know, I've been here for 13, 14 years now, seeing how it operates. I think it's manageable. We're always, I don't care if you put 50 officers out here on the street, we're gonna keep getting complaints. There's always gonna be somebody who does something wrong. There's always gonna be somebody who's not happy with the measures that are being taken. It's never enough, or it's gonna be too much. You're never gonna please everybody. But I think for the best public service that we can provide, and we take the 10 that we're gonna be up to, I thank the board for getting us there, gonna have us 2 officers per shift. We supplement that instead of these seasonal officers, we supplement it with somebody who can help us in-house, and then give out a year or so, and if it needs to be readdressed, if the community's not happy with the services that we're providing, then we can readdress it, or if the police department says, hey, we need more, or this just isn't working, then we can readdress it, but it's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't know. And I know I've thrown a monkey wrench in this whole thing, and I do apologize, but that's.
No, you didn't. I guess it gets back to my understanding of what we were trying to do here. The idea, at least when I proposed it during the Board of Commissioners meeting, was that, is it feasible, or is it more economical and efficient to only have seasonal employees? We've gone a little bit beyond that because the board has already authorized having 10 officers. My idea was to try this before we went to that step. So we're beyond that. So the question now, as I see it, is we're going to have 10 police officers. I'm not sure if I agree with you that that doubles the amount of people on patrol, because the way, I don't have the data here, but the way it is now, you have 3 teams, right?
Two,
A, B, and C.
well, there's.
They
well,
work
two-
12-hour shifts.
Yes,
So if you schedule it, you'd actually have 1.5 officers on patrol,
well,
half of the time. Right?
sometimes, yes,
Yeah.
half the
Half of the time, you would have
correct.
12 officers on patrol. The other half of the time, you'd only have 1 officer. So you're
Correct.
going to supplement it, but it doesn't actually double it. But this one we should have 2 officers all the time.
Yes, when we get to 10, there'll be 8 patrol officers, so there'll be 2 per shift.
Okay, so, so we're going to supplement it. So the question, again, to me, it was pretty simple. Could we have seasonal officers do the job? And that's the entire job,
Right.
patrol, everything. What would it cost us to do that as opposed to hiring permanent police officers?
Right.
That was what I was looking at.
Right.
We've gone more to kind of, the discussion has been the Strand and parking, and that, what, my thing is does it make any sense at all to look at the difference in cost and efficiency? Because I think that we'll all agree that when you look at it, there's a 6-month period here where we're not very busy.
Right.
We're not very busy.
We-
And really, I mean,
We-
with the data you give us here, when you look at the business checks and the alarm activation, that's more than 50% of all of the calls for service that go on the island.
That's right. And I like to call that preventative maintenance.
I got you.
Yeah.
But if we never did it, we would hardly know it wasn't done, right?
It depends. It depends if the windows are broken in every time you ride by a house and the door's kicked in.
Okay, then I would ask you, how many times during the business checks have we found broken windows and the doors kicked in?
Just one.
Okay. 1,186 calls for service, 1 positive.
Right. Sounds to me like our officers are doing a good job.
Well, it sounds to me that we live in a nice community that, you know, what we have to do, Chief, I understand. My thing is balance the cost with the benefit. And so that was the whole thing about the temporary people as opposed to full-time employment. So I don't disagree with you, since we have 10 officers, whether or not we should hire temporary employees. I don't think that's the issue, but the point when we brought this up was we wanted to do it in such a time so that they would be on board for the next season when we do need the additional help. Since we already have 10 officers, it's not as pressing as it was when it was raised at the board meeting a few months ago. So that's, I mean, does anybody else have a different idea of what we were trying to accomplish with this seasonal employee? And then I would say the same, and my way of looking at it is that we have 2 people on patrol at all times. We have trucks that can drive on the beach, right?
Not during the summer. I do not like our trucks on the beach. There's too many people. There's not enough room. I tell our officers not to, unless it's life or death situation, I don't want to see our trucks on the
You get
beach.
a truck out there, you'll have a hard time getting it back. You patrol this beach from one end to the other with a truck, you're gonna have a hard time getting it back.
Will they respond to a complaint in a truck?
I-
Because if the case is, I tell my officers not to go onto the beach strand with a truck, then it doesn't matter who's calling from the beach. I'm attacked by a dog, there is, an issue out here, there won't be a response?
There's still it's quicker. Anywhere you call from, unless you're right across the access, it is quicker for me to drive to the address and walk across the beach access. 10 times quicker during the summer. It's just, those trucks are way too big. During the wintertime, they're great. If it's life or death, you need to, they're doing CPR and you need to get get somebody loaded into the bed of a pickup truck to get them to an ambulance, that's
It's the
different.
address.
That, yeah, but go ahead.
If it's high tide, you're not going anywhere.
I disagree with that.
Only
I
in
disagree with
Only
that.
in a couple places.
I disagree with that, with the statement that if it's high tide, you can't
There's-
get to it.
there-
There's 100 feet of beach out there that's dry sand.
There's only
It's
a couple places.
That's case dependent.
Yeah, there's only a couple places that have very high tide, I think it's totally blocked. But there are some places at high tide where there's no dry beach, but it's not island-wide, for sure.
I agree with that. If you get on the west end, you're not coming back. On high tide.
Okay, just, I want y'all to realize what you're saying now, where you're going to, because we have purchased those trucks for the sole purpose of being able to access the beach. So just realize that what you're doing is you're putting yourself into a Prius out here on the highway. Just realize what you're doing, okay?
I was just
So
going to
let-
ask that question. If
Let's
we
make
don't-
sure that what
Yeah,
we're
no,
doing
no.
is rational here.
Yeah.
And that we're not making overarching generalities
We're not
that are
talking-
gonna come back and haunt you at budget time.
We are not,
Okay.
we're not feet deep in water along the Strand.
Because I can tell you when an emergency happens,
They can-
the cops drive their vehicles out there, regardless of if it's quicker to go to the address and get across.
Yeah.
When you do a lost child look, you got to get out on the beach and ride up and down the beach regardless of how many people are out there. So just, let's be particular about how we make these general statements on how those assets are utilized, okay? I just want to put that forth.
I did see a police officer on the beach patrolling the other morning.
Right.
So I know that they come out, it was off-season, so it's not as crowded. But
Correct.
they were all the way at West End and going back down. So I do know they can do it.
Yeah,
I do know they can do it.
I guess that's the point I was going to make, and David made it as well. Why are we using $60,000 trucks instead of $30,000 cars or $35,000 cars if the trucks can't go on the beach?
they
What is the
can.
utility in that?
Because it's more than just a dog's running off the beach, running off the leash. I wouldn't, we don't need to spend a $60,000 truck on a dog running off the leash. But we deal with other stuff too, just like he was talking about with the missing persons, but we get a hurricane about once a year. And I promise you that Prius is not gonna make it.
I understand, Chief, but I guess what I'm saying is, it's almost like, as we go through this, we want certain benefits, and we can paint a picture of why we want it, but then we want to utilize it for something else. Well, that doesn't fit the profile. I guess what I was going to suggest is, and what I was thinking, in my mind, and you tell me why I'm wrong, is that if we have enough people, police officers to patrol, we don't need a constant presence on the beach because as we know, what happens is it happens for a little while and then it doesn't happen. But if a police officer were to patrol the beach during his or her shift, once or twice, in their truck, telling people to get the dog off the beach or doing whatever it is that they're supposed to do, why couldn't we do that, since we would have the manpower and the people could just make a trip up and down the beach and show the flag and tell people what they can and can't do when they see a violation? Is that possible?
It is, that's completely doable. We've got the equipment and we've got the personnel to do it.
Because that then comes back to the initial, what raised all of this at the beginning was people saying, what are we going to do about mainly dogs on the beach? Because the beach rangers are not getting the recognition they used to as being a force that makes people stop.
Right.
And it was, unless they can call the police immediately and the police respond almost immediately, it doesn't impact. So how do you get police presence on the beach enough so that people realize this is serious, we need to follow the rules?
Yeah. Well, and it's doable. With the 2 officers on patrol, it's definitely doable.
Yes, one of, excuse me, one of the other questions that we left open to this meeting was that the type of transportation that will be used and the cost associated to that use. So hypothetically speaking, we have seasonal employees. How do they do their job?
UTVs, just like the Gators or the, if you're gonna concentrate them on the beach, if you're,
No, see,
just seasonal, not concentrated on the beach, just seasonal additional patrol officers.
yes.
It would just have to be a regular patrol vehicle. And we could,
Which we have or don't have.
You don't have them?
we don't have.
Okay. So, I guess- so in order to do what we were just talking about, for a seasonal employee, we'd have to get 2 more vehicles so that they'd be available for their use. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I mean, you could hot seat if they're, because if they would be part-time seasonal, you know, if they're only limited to whatever hypothetical hours we say, you know, 20 hours a week or whatever, then they could share and rotate that vehicle. So, 1 or 2, depending on how many we're gonna work per shift. Of course, the uniforms, you know, I have not priced out all that stuff, but I could.
Okay. Did you want to speak about this?
Well, I had actually, before Chief Dixon came in with thinking we should let it go for a year and see how we react, I'd actually gone onto a sort of list of violations of concern, the things that I've heard from people and you've heard from people, we've all heard from people the last several years, and which ones did or didn't make sense to have be the focus of, and when I was thinking part-time, I was thinking, you know, like a certain number of hours a week, having several of these people, and you focus on the periods that are necessary to watch out for the violations that we kind of keep track of and know when they're happening. And then against each of those, it was questions for each point, you know, kind of when do these happen, when you would need the extra help. And then it came down to transportation vehicle necessary, additional equipment other than vehicle, training, what insurance is necessary, and then is this something someone else could do, and if so, who? So it was sort of putting up a grid to try to work out where to focus, and it would also help when are you putting people out, and it would give you a count of how many people do you think you need. Now, you're suggesting to come back next year and revisit this, essentially.
If it's even necessary, we don't, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, just by saying, I think with the full complement now, we can do this. That obviously it says, at some point after a year, I'm gonna come and say, here's where we are.
Right.
You know, there's gonna be a sort of a, how we've responded, how things have gone, and we're good to go, or we still have some issues.
Right.
So, but you're asking for a year with full force.
Yeah. I think it will give us a better idea, because I just like you said, I think we're kind of all in here trying to figure out which direction to go. I think we're all looking at this kind of from a different angle. So just, my opinion is, let us try what we have now, see if it's working, see if it's not working before we try to fix it. Because we don't even know if it's broken to try to fix it.
But the one thing you are saying you need is you do need a full-time in the office for calls, and they can do things, other things.
And I understand that's a completely different
Yeah.
than what we did here. But yes, that would actually, as far as servicing the community, that will do more for us and for the community than, in my opinion, than adding seasonal officers right now.
We've never had that though, right?
We have not since I've been here. We've never had a full-time.
Okay. You have anything?
No?
What I would like is somebody prepare a chart that shows the cost of a full-time employee as opposed to a seasonal employee. Everything included. Their fringe benefits, if we have to get another vehicle, because we put in an amount of time here, and whether we implement it or we don't implement it, and you're gonna do this again next year, at least we've had the groundwork, and you don't have to do the same, plow the same field again next time this topic comes up. Because the whole point is it feasible? Is it economical? Is it gonna be efficient? So, tell me what it's gonna cost to have a seasonal patrol officer that actually does the job of a police officer, or, in the alternative, a seasonal person who's going to act with a little bit more authority than the ranger, as opposed to the cost of what our ranger program is, right? Because that seems to be the issue here. Are we going to put people on the beach, or are we going to have people on patrol? Like I said, I thought when I raised this issue, we didn't have a full complement, so this was a way to complement the amount of people we had so that the police officer wouldn't be out there by themselves. They'd be able to do their job and do it in a safer environment for the police officer. Hopefully, we've taken care of that by hiring another police officer, so there'll always be two on duty at any given time. But I'd still like to know what the cost is and how we would utilize those people and what it would take to utilize those people.
Can we drill into that and with some specifics? Because when you say a full-time employee, a patrol officer,
Well,
And it's-
how about if we do it this way? We have Officer Smith, who works the regular shift, gets all the benefits, newly hired, right? And then we have Officer Jones, who's a seasonal employee, who's going to work,
that was my first question, was we're talking in law enforcement officers.
yes.
Okay.
And then we're gonna have the seasonal employee who's gonna work the maybe 120 days. We had done some math I didn't bring my papers from last time about how many hours we were going to, I guess we were gonna use the same amount of hours for the police officer as we currently use for the rangers.
Well, the break point on paying the fringes is 1,000 hours. So we need to say that they're 1,000 hours. So 16 weeks is about 1,300 hours. If it's, did you say 4 months? 120 days is 4 months. That's 1,300 hours. So
Yeah, but-
that's the break point there.
Right, but just like with the ranger program was more than that, but it's divided amongst the number of rangers, right? So
Right.
we were thinking having a
I'm
couple
gonna go ahead and make a comment on that.
Sure.
I don't think that you can get a law enforcement professional to come in here like you do somebody covering a waitress shift at McDonald's. I really don't. And the beach rangers, yeah, they do represent the town, but they are nowhere near the types of discipline and what the expectation and what is required of a law enforcement officer. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just don't think that that's very realistic to think that we're going to get a law enforcement professional on 20-hour-a-week possible call-out. I don't see that working. I know that if you want to budget 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours and have 5 or 6 people on call, I wouldn't want that job. That'd be a nightmare on trying to coordinate those people.
I don't think that's what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is we can speak to the police chief, but you have, the Rangers aren't on call, right? The Rangers have a schedule, and they work a given schedule. So if we have two.
Sometimes,
Well,
sometimes.
so if we have seasonal officers, we give them a schedule. We don't say, sit by the phone and we're gonna call you up if we need you on Tuesday, is you know when the heaviest time is, right? Whether it's from 10 to 2 in the afternoon or from 2 to 6 at night or whatever. And we're gonna use you X number of days a week for 4 or 5 hours a day. I don't know anything about the difficulty in finding somebody under those circumstances, and I don't think for a second that it's just as easy to get somebody who's a professional as it is to get a college kid who's trying to make a couple of bucks. I don't disagree with any of that, but you mischaracterize what I believe we can do. We just have a regular schedule and see if somebody wants to fill that schedule. A retired guy might feel like 20 hours a week is perfect.
Okay, I'll limit my calculations to the number side of it and not offer, because I'm offering opinions from an operator's perspective that, in a world that I'm not the expert in.
Yeah.
So I'll just do the back shop math on the number of hours that there are.
But I'll tell you that just with the Beach Ranger program, everything David said is about as accurate as you're gonna get it as to how difficult it is. And even though those people are trying to make a few bucks and that kind of stuff, you can put 4 or 5 people on a schedule, and when you're running them like you are waitresses, like David said, sometimes you're lucky, because everybody wants to work as much as they possibly can, and in order to cover all those areas, it's hard to manage, like David said, really hard.
And it may be impossible. I don't believe that's the issue. The issue is it feasible and efficient? And if the answer is it's not feasible or efficient, then we move on. But we won't know if it's feasible and efficient unless we do this type of research. And if we can't find people who want to do it, then this exercise is done. But if we do find people who can do it, is it feasible and reasonable for us to take that course of action?
Right, so we can start with a programmatic for a current employee, full-time cop.
Sure, you
We can-
already
we-
had
we-
that.
We can get a number for that, but the specifics of the seasonal employee, how many hours are we going, I need to translate that into a shift profile in order to put a number on it. I heard 1 or 2 cars. Well, are we gonna have 2 vehicles? Are we gonna, so let's make the decision so we can put a number on it in order to do a chart. Is it 1 or 2 vehicles? Was this either $60,000 or $120,000?
Yeah, no.
So
I get
somebody
you.
called a ball.
I get you. And I guess my answer to that would be, give me both. Give me
Okay.
2 people and 1 car, and give me 4 people and 2 cars.
But is the 1 vehicle, 1 or 2 vehicles, are you gonna hot seat though? What is the number of hours with the employees? If you're gonna have 6 part-time seasonal officers, what's the hour load on those employees? I need a shift. Are you gonna run them in the daytime? Are you talking about running the equivalent of 3 bodies 7 days a week, with your mid-shift coverage, your day shift, night shift, coverage shift? What's the profile on that? Because that's got to be a number. I've got to have hours in order to program against cost.
I don't think you're talking about running them overnight. I think you're talking about running them in the daytime and evening. I mean, the things that we're talking about, I don't think we're talking about 3 shifts. I think we're talking about the peak times in season, which is typically for, overnight things are suspicious activity, business checks and things. But the moving vehicle, the parking, et cetera, those are daytime, evening kind of things. So
So we're talking about a 12-hour shift over the course of 7 days a week in the summertime?
No, what we're doing is, it's up to the chief, right? The idea was, how could you best utilize a seasonal employee,
Seasonal employee.
right?
So the answer, if you're looking at call volume and the peak times, then it would probably be 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., something like that. So you're looking at 12 hours a day for however many, say 150 days or whatever the Memorial Day to Labor Day is, you know, I'd have to look at a calendar, but basically 4 months.
Okay, so that's 12 hours a day and 7 days a week. What type of faces would you put against those 12 hours? Is that one guy, gal, or are you talking about two bodies? Because the number of people
Right.
that you put against those hours is gonna dictate how the benefits are calculated. Okay, so if you've got 12 hours of coverage, see what I'm talking about?
Right, oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Do you-
So,
It may take 6 officers, I don't know, I'm just throwing a note, it may
Yeah.
take 6 officers to cover those hours to keep it from going to full-time and doing benefits. I don't know where the break point is.
What's the aesthetics of that gonna look like?
I'm sorry?
This is off the chart, but I was just thinking about the aesthetics, let's go to one level, right up down the beach.
Right.
we can get a number, whether it's right or wrong.
A lot of traffic out there.
So, 12 hours a day of coverage for 120 days is, 1,400 hours. Now, 1,440 hours, so how you're going to use that, are you gonna split that between 2, 3 people? How are you gonna do that? It's ironic that, yeah, okay.
I guess one question I have
Because
too,
how the benefits gonna be calculated?
right, how do the benefits calculated? Does it matter if they work 80 hours in 1 week? Or or have you gotta keep them under 40 per week?
You got it.
Where's your break point for full-time versus,
FLSA is 2 weeks, right? 2-week period?
It's 207K exemption, that's right. That's right.
so it's
When you get to 84,
84? So if you keep them at 76 over a 2-week, then they're part-time. So we'd have to, I have to sit down with a calendar and figure out 12-hour shifts to actually be 72. So they'd work 6 out of 14 days. So to cover 14 days, I'd need 2.5 officers to keep them part-time.
which is
Because
3.
2 officers would
Which is
be
3.
12, well, yeah, it's just 2 officers would be 12 days, so I need at least 3 to cover 2 weeks.
Which means you're gonna have to hot seat a car.
Yes.
3 bodies.
3 bodies will hot seat 1 car, so it would run 12 hours a day.
But again, remember, part of our assumption is that there are people, as Mike referred, maybe retired, or people who have family circumstances, that they would like to work, but cannot work full-time.
Right.
So, or choose not to because they want more lifetime. So it's sort of like the covering 12 hours. It can be there are people that would be happy to do 4 to 6 hours several days a week, and that satisfies them in terms of keeping their hand in it and the money that they appreciate having, versus I am not tied to being a police officer where, as you know, things can get difficult finding time for yourself.
Right.
And these were some of the questions that we were thinking to ask other cities, municipalities about, you know, the hours, how do they schedule, what the people they hire, why have they decided to go seasonal or part-time? Do they have difficulty finding and keeping people, or do they get repeat people? You know, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in my own industry, how many people were happy to go to consultancy because there weren't part-time positions, but they didn't want to work full-time anymore.
Right.
So you went to consultancy. Couldn't find true part-time, but it was really the same thing. You didn't have benefits anymore, but you got that income.
Right,
And that was what they wanted now, and to keep their hand in it.
that's right.
I agree with Mike, it's good to have sort of things pegged, all this work we've gotten to this point, so that a year from now, if we have to come and revisit this, we have a starting point.
Right, that's right.
What's the rate that we want to use for the seasonal employees?
I don't
Is it-
know what the
Is it
starting-
like $18
I
or
don't know what
something?
the starting,
I have to look it up, but you have
Yeah.
to start them at what we start a normal.
Somehow the number 1790 is in my head,
Yeah,
but
something
it's the hourly rate.
yes.
$17.23.
Okay. So I think I have two things, and then we can probably adjourn this thing. I would appreciate it if the next meeting, any handouts that are going to be here, if I could get it a day or two beforehand. I mean, I like to look at the material that I'm going to talk about and get an opportunity to digest it before I talk about it. And number two, I think we're at the point where we should see if we can talk to the chief that agreed to speak to us.
Okay.
And maybe,
Yeah.
maybe he or she can answer some of the questions that we just had here today on how they utilize people, how easy it is or difficult it is to get people to want to fill this type of position. And like I said, all the questions that we just kicked around here today.
Are we planning on having him to Zoom in, or is he gonna, face-to-face visit with us, Jeremy?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check on his schedule and see. Last time he was available to come, there was, another one that was available to Zoom was off, so.
Okay.
We'll figure that out as, when is the next meeting?
First Thursday of November, whatever date that is. This one was as early in the month as it could be, so.
Just to follow up on that, are we still looking at a December deliverable to the commissioners, or was that suspense soft?
That was on the assumption we would come up with something, that if we came up with something that said go forward, it was
For
when the
budget.
chief said he needed to know so that he could get people, so that he could make sure we had people.
Well, but I'm thinking about the deliverable to the Board of Commissioners in terms of a report. Am I not right there? Or-
No, you're right, but the idea was we wanted to be able to do that so we'd have time to do in the budget, right? And now it seems that we've already hired full-time police officers, and now this is, and the chief is suggesting he would be more comfortable if we didn't hire any in the upcoming season.
Right.
So the time is not of the essence any longer, so I don't think we have to make a report to the full board until later. You know, March would probably be
Yeah,
fine.
A recommendation to the board is called for, you know, a sort of summation of what we've decided. But the kind of report we're talking about with the financials and everything doesn't need to come until spring. Originally, we had talked about March until Jeremy had said, if I'm going to have to hire people, I need to know before the end of the year. So I think we're back to,
Two different issues.
Yeah.
I would like the financials at the next meeting, but the report to the full board doesn't have to be till March or April.
Okay, and my thing is that I'd like the full report to the board before March or April, or else it's just gonna be a cacophony and rolled into the budget deliberations. Let's put the issue in front of the board before we get into budget deliberations, so I know what number to plug in terms of force manpower. If it's going to be extra cops, have that decision made.
Okay?
And that's just, my position. I'll
I got
defer
you.
to the committee members.
well, as I said, we're still talking about the recommendation to the board needs to be made before the end of the year. And if the recommendation is that we are not going to proceed with part-time in the upcoming year, we're going to let the current status with the expanded force run for a year and then do a check, that's a recommendation that doesn't need a report.
Right.
But the report is necessary to have in place so that a year from now, when we say, how are we after we've run a season with a full force? Are we thinking we do need some supplement? Then we have something to work with. That's already
I'm not
worked.
seeing, I'm not understanding that, the way that, I think that this committee's job was to make a recommendation
But the
on
delay of-
moving forward with the force
Well,
structure, right?
This is why the delay of having a full report until March, it can be as soon as it can be produced, but by March would be appropriate, so that if there were going to be anything factored into the budget, just in case, it could be, but the recommendation isn't going to be that. The recommendation at the moment is not going to be we proceed with seasonal or part-time for the 2021 summer season. But
I think that's the report.
Well, no,
I don't see how you can have a recommendation without that being the report back to the board
Well,
on
but the
what the
report,
deliverable
no, the
was.
report we're talking about includes the discussions we've had, the calculations that have been done for future reference as necessary, and also, we will have a talk with another municipality that will also be wrapped into the information we obtain. So it covers all the information we obtain and the work we've put in and the calculations. So if we do next year have to trigger this again, we have everything in a document.
Can I maybe clarify
Help.
this a bit? Yes.
I
As I
just need
said,
some help here.
I want the numbers.
Right.
We'd all appreciate the numbers. We can make the recommendation to the board, which is, we're not looking to hire seasonal employees for the 21 season. And then, in April and May, when we've finished all of our work, we can actually make an inclusive report that will document all the work we did, and we can give that to the board. Is that simple enough?
What did the task from the Board of Commissioners to this committee set up? Did it have a deadline on making a report? Because I don't think that we can amend that. If there's a thing in there that says to make a recommendation to them, I think that the committee's got to go back with a report.
The hard copies in my office.
Or the committee can ask the board to change the date of the deliverable. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I don't think this is, we're kicking semantics around here.
Well, I don't agree with that. I
Well,
don't
let me
agree. I
finish.
think it's
Pat's
important to bring a
view of what
deliverable for them.
Pat's view of what the report is an all-encompassing report. I think your view and my view is that a recommendation to the board is what's called for. But we can do that. We could do that next meeting, we could do it by the date that's set. I think we said December. I think we said December when we set this up. And then we could either have a report that includes what the analysis of the cost of a full-time current employee as opposed to a seasonal employee, and we could give that information to the board. But that's not really required, right? What's required is the recommendation of hiring or not hiring seasonal employees for the upcoming season.
Well, I think that you and I both, us both know that the rational expectation is going to be for some type of information to be backing up a recommendation. And I would see that to be some type of report, what we've done, what we've discussed, who
Okay.
we've talked to, what type of information. We want financial data, and this is why the recommendation is coming forward.
Okay.
Now, if that's not
We'll make it
correct, because
we'll make-
otherwise you're
no.
writing a report to
We'll make
support
it
a
simple,
recommendation.
because when I first made the suggestion, I believe I said February or March, and we moved it up to December because we wanted to give the chief enough time to interview and perhaps hire people. If we're not going to interview and hire people, there's really no time pressure to get the report to the board. So if what we can do is, next meeting, clerk, please put on the next Board of Commissioners meeting that we're going to bring this up to the full board to ask to change the deliverable date.
And
And
that,
then we'll take care of everything in one fell swoop. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
and then, let's go ahead and keep scratching the scab here. Who's gonna be responsible for writing the report? Because at these meetings, we've assimilated and we've brought back information. Who's gonna be responsible for writing the
I'll
report?
write it.
And my question is, there's 4 of us on the committee. How are we going to make sure that any disagreements with what might be written by you are articulated?
The same way you do it in any place else, that he produces a draft that then has a discussion, and just like
Okay.
anything else, a discussion and an agreement on the final content. He produces a draft that then has to be agreed by everybody for a final report, correct?
Yes. I'll distribute it to everybody, and then you can reply individually,
Okay.
and we'll be good. But I can't believe there'll be any disagreement. Does anybody else have anything? I move that we adjourn.